evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Gareth Williams. The IMF representative to Jamaica, Dr. Constant Lonkeng Ngwana, says the US dollar has been strengthening against its trading partners around the world and not just against the Jamaican currency. That is why he says more Jamaicans should focus on having a competitive exchange rate and not just on the fluctuations of the dollar. Dr. Lonkeng Ngwana was a guest on BATV's business discussion program On Point. Sashana Small has more.
Dr. Constant Lonkeng Ngwana says Jamaicans should note that global developments have caused the US dollar to strengthen.
It's given that the US dollar, it's a foreign good, so in a sense, the value of the US dollar cannot be independent of global developments. Because if you look at the data, you will realize that the US dollar has been strengthening across the board. So all the currencies of US trade partners, most of them are depreciating against the US, and even faster. Most of them depreciating faster than the Jamaican dollar.
He argues that more focus should be placed on having an exchange rate that improves the competitiveness of the Jamaican economy.
It's an exchange rate that improves the competitiveness of the Jamaican economy so that manufacturers are able to be competitive when they're selling their good. Because if the price of the Jamaican dollar is too high, you lose competitiveness because you won't be able to attract markets. If Jamaica is an expensive destination, because if people are moving from Czech Republic and they want to visit Montego Bay and they only get so much for the euro, that does not incentivize them to come here. So your exchange rate should be at a level that is consistent, compatible with competitiveness.
In the meantime, Dr. Constant Lonkeng Ngwana says the central bank needs to get the inflation back on target, as this is crucial for long-term economic planning.
It can shape expectations, so people know what to expect, and it can improve the predictability of the economy. So if you change that too often, it alters the long-term planning of firms, of households. So you want the inflation expectation to be well anchored and anchored at a level which can accommodate the type of growth that goes with it.
For BATV News, I'm Sashana Small.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the much-anticipated Data Protection Act will be rolled out in conjunction with the National Identification System NIDS come 2019. The Prime Minister, who was speaking at the Caribbean Broadcasting Union's 49th Annual General Assembly in Kingston, Jamaica last evening, says by doing this, the government can effectively safeguard the privacy and security of the Jamaican people. Jamila Maitland reports.
Prime Minister Holness says Jamaica being ranked 6th in the world for freedom of the press speaks volumes of the relationship between successive governments and the media over the years.
You would have seen significant legislation passed. I've just mentioned, for example, the total reform of the Defamation Act, taking out criminal libel. But you would have also seen the passage of legislation for freedom for access to information. You would have seen passage of the whistleblower legislation. And now we are at a point where we are in our parliament discussing the Data Protection Act.
He says the Data Protection Act is expected to strengthen the country's new National Identification System, NIDS.
The Data Protection Bill comes on the heel of Jamaica putting in place a national identification system. And a part of the call surrounding the national identification system is the protection of data. So there are two forces at play. One is the privacy of data for the public and the security of that data, which enhances the privacy. And the other is access to data, access to information.
But he says the act being drafted and redrafted requires careful consideration for not only the NID system, but for the press as well.
The parliament, filled with politicians, sit at the intersection of these two competing perspectives. But I believe that we will find the right solution. Certainly, we would not want to create a moral hazard for the press in creating any criminal liability as it would relate to the protections you already have in terms of your ability to investigate without criminal liability.
For BATV News, I'm Jamila Maitland.
In the meantime, the Registrar General Department, RGD, is being revamped as the National Identification and Registration Authority. The agency will now be charged with carrying out the management of the National Identification System, NIDS, in addition to civil registration. Project Coordinator for the RGD transformation, Charlton McFarlane, says among key activities to be undertaken in preparation for this is the digitization of RGD records, which is expected to result in significant efficiency gains. He further notes that funds have also been set aside to get a new civil registration system. The RGD will also bring a consultant on board to review its civil registration system as well as its operational procedures. Mr. McFarlane says the RGD is also partnering with the NIDS project to identify and register Jamaicans who are not currently registered through island-wide engagement activities. This will take place across the island over the next 18 months. It's been 2 weeks since Dr. Andrew Wheatley resigned from the Science and Technology Ministry, and even longer since he gave up the energy portfolio. But Prime Minister Andrew Holness is yet to name a successor. Opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips says the situation of having the portfolios under the oversight of the Prime Minister is untenable. Jamila Maitland has more.
Dr. Peter Phillips says Prime Minister Andrew Holness should shut down the government if he can't find someone to lead the Science, Technology and Energy Ministry. The opposition leader, while addressing comrades in Northeast St. Catherine, listed several ministers within the office of the Prime Minister who could possibly head the portfolio.
Him have 4 ministers in a Jamaica house alone and about 20 portfolio. Him have 4 ministers. Him have Samuda. Him have Mike Henry. Him have Warmington and him have Vaz. Him have people in the House of Representatives and him have people in the Senate, and he's saying to the country that not one of them in his mind is an obvious choice to be a minister of government. Then if him have no people can run the country, him shouldn't try run it, lock it down.
But an unbothered Prime Minister Holness, who was speaking at the St. Catharines Southeastern Constituency Conference, said he was more concerned with rebuilding the ministry and will not be forced to make any uninformed decisions.
This government is not going to be pulled by every cry and every criticism and every bad mouthing. This government is going to take its time, analyze the problem, study the facts, and come up with long-term institutionalized solutions that will bring the prosperity that you deserve.
He's reassuring the public that his administration is functioning with transparency and is awaiting the findings of the ongoing investigations to make a justified decision.
And whatever we find in our government that is not meeting the standards we have set, once we go through our process of verification, that we will take action. And in the cases that have been brought to our attention or we have discovered ourselves, we have taken action to make sure that our government is strong and transparent and has a strong stance against corruption.
For BATV News, I'm Jamila Maitland.
And when we come back, Salada Foods says exports to North America continue to improve. This and more after the break. Welcome back. Salada Foods realized profits of about $137 million during the 9-month period ended June 2018. Exports to North America and Canada also improved. Javon Keys has the details.
For the period October 2017 to June 2018, Salada Foods recorded revenues of almost $749 million. That's an increase of about $136 million compared to the corresponding period last year. Net profit for the period was $136 million. That's up by $73.6 million over the previous year. In the meantime, domestic sales through the company's distributor trended upward by 11%. This increase was supported by the introduction of the Mountain Bliss 876 brand, which has achieved 45% distribution into the retail market since its launch in May of this year. Salada Foods exports also grew by $40.48 million or 63%. This was due to increased exports into North America. Sales to Canada have also increased by about 100%. Selling and promotional expenses for the 9-month period were $41 million. That's down by $2.4 million. This was due to a shift in marketing strategy which saw the company employing social media instead of traditional media sources to target a younger audience. Administrative expenses were almost $90 million. Meanwhile, the company says the results for the period aligned correctly with the indicators that were set for upward movement going forward. However, Salada says the upward trajectory will be affected if the government does not remove the recently imposed tax on imported green beans. For BATV News, I'm Javon Keys.
Cargo Handlers Limited saw increased revenue and net profits for the period April to June 2018. The information was contained in the company's third quarter report released recently. Norder Francis Williams has the numbers.
For the third quarter ended June 30, 2018, Cargo Handlers Limited registered $93 million in revenue. That's 22% above the corresponding quarter in 2017. The company incurred $41.5 million in expenses, which was a $3.6 million increase compared to the same period last year. These expenses were mainly due to corresponding salaries from increased activities. Meanwhile, the net profit for the period advanced by $10 million to $41.8 million. Earnings per share for the quarter amounted to 11 cents per shareholder, which is 37% more than the sum distributed for the similar period last year. In the meantime, the company is attributing the results to the positive influence of the Western region's commercial and construction sector, which continue to support the local shipping industry. The company says key objectives regarding operational and financial performance have been achieved, and it is expected to continue through the prudent management of their resources. For BATV News, I'm Norder Francis Williams.
MBJ Limited, operators of the Sangster International Airport, says the construction on the ramp and taxiways are 80% complete. The company invested US $26 million into the resurfacing of the taxiways, shoulders, and ramps at the airport. The project was contracted to S&G Roads in 2017 in collaboration with CEMEX. Deputy Airport Director Carlos Salgado says S&G Road Surfacing has finished the asphalt work and the overall job is scheduled to conclude by the end of November. Regional and international stories are next. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's now time for regional and international stories. An apparent viral illness left nearly 100 guests and staff at Sandals Royal Bahamas suffering from nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. More from our News' Jasmine Brown.
The health minister says since his ministry was alerted, officials have been actively involved in monitoring the situation at the luxury resort. The Ministry of Health said in a statement it was notified of gastrointestinal symptoms being experienced by guests and staff on August 7th. While officials did not name the resort, our news understands it's Sandals Royal Bahamian. Hotel guests shared their nightmarish experiences on the travel review site TripAdvisor. One visitor from Pennsylvania wrote, 4 days ago, my wife and I were currently at the resort. Both of us have been struck by whatever virus, aka vomiting, for hours. We were at dinner and 3 of the 6 couples at the table had been impacted. Meanwhile, Lauren S. from Texas wrote 6 days ago, It's not fun getting a stomach virus when you're 6 months pregnant. This has ruined our trip and we will not be coming back to this resort again. Teams from the Ministry of Health and the Department of Environmental Health Services have made multiple visits to the property in response to reports.
The evidence seems to suggest that this is a norwalk virus or a norovirus outbreak, which is fairly common in dormitories and hotels and cruise ships, typically spread by direct contact.
Norovirus is a common gastrointestinal illness in North America that is not known to be deadly, but it does have several uncomfortable symptoms. The most common are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach cramps, but others can include fever, chills, and aches. Those with weaker immune systems, such as pregnant women, young children, or the elderly, may develop more severe symptoms. The health minister says given the similarity in symptoms, officials explored the possibility that the outbreak was linked to a recent rise in conch poisoning cases.
Health and environmental health have conducted extensive reviews of the clinical logs and also inspected the site. And at this time, we do not believe, based on our assessment, that this is a Vibrio or conch poisoning bacterial problem.
Sands estimates that just under 100 people were impacted. He added that many of the cases were treated by the hotel's healthcare providers, and those who required medical attention at local hospitals were treated and released.
We are also satisfied that the resort has implemented all of the local and internationally recommended guidelines for mitigation. Based on the caseload on a daily basis, there has now been a consistent, dramatic reduction in the number of cases. There is no need for the general public to be concerned.
In response to guest complaints on TripAdvisor, online review coordinator for Sandals, Vanessa J. wrote, "It seems that a relatively small percentage of guests have experienced some gastrointestinal symptoms, which seem more indicative of a 24-hour stomach bug, and does not appear to have originated on the property. To be prudent, we have doubled our sanitation sterilization measures." Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Cuba is undertaking its most significant political change in over 40 years, and the government is encouraging citizens to get involved. Thousands of community meetings are being held across the country so people can share their thoughts on the new draft constitution. Al Jazeera's Julia Galliano reports from one of those gatherings in Havana.
Their workday is done at this hospital in Havana, but the staff can't go home yet. They're staying on to discuss the proposed changes to the Cuban Constitution. Thousands of these government-organized meetings are taking place across the island over the next 3 months. It's the most comprehensive change to the country's constitution in over 40 years.
I'm here to fulfill my revolutionary duty. I haven't read the full project yet, but I think it's all great.
Last month, Cuba's National Assembly approved the draft constitution after several days of televised debate. The main changes propose establishing term limits on the presidency while cementing the Communist Party as the sole governing body on the island.
The process will help strengthen the unity of all Cubans around the revolution.
But Cuba's legislators had to make concessions to reflect an evolving society and to try to ensure a more sustainable economy. For the first time since the Castro-led revolution took power, the proposed Magna Carta recognizes private property, long considered an enemy of a socialist society. Same-sex marriage has also been proposed, perhaps the most visible of social issues to feature in the constitutional draft. The government is encouraging Cubans to read this document in detail. It's made it available for sale at newsstands all across the island, and to take part in the public meetings about it. The leadership here says these meetings are emblematic of the country's democratic process, while critics, of course, dismiss the entire exercise as pointless. The problem, they say, is that the government is only effecting changes to benefit themselves, not ordinary people. But for a society that has barely experienced any constitutional change since the Soviet era, many analysts argue that even small changes matter.
Cuba is changing, and the Constitution is part of that change. It won't make the change go faster or slow it down. The Constitution is not above that change. It won't reject everything people want, nor will it give everything that they expect.
The process from here is a painstaking one. Officials are expected to take down the participants' comments and send them back to the assembly. Cubans will then vote on a final document in a referendum early next year. Julia Galliano, Al Jazeera, Havana.
17 senior officials and business people responsible for a multi-billion-dollar railway project in Kenya have been arrested for corruption. The railway, which was funded by China, connects the capital Nairobi with the port city of Mombasa. Al Jazeera's Catherine Soyi reports from Nairobi.
This is the latest corruption case involving the construction of a railway line in Kenya, the biggest and most expensive infrastructure project in the country at the moment. The heads of the National Land Commission, the State Railway and other business people have pleaded not guilty to 19 charges including fraud, corruption and abuse of office. They're accused of authorizing payments for compensation of land used in the construction of a section of the railway, about $3 million paid to people or for land that did not exist or that was already owned by the Railways Corporation. This year the government has intensified its crackdown on corruption in a way Kenyans have not seen in a long time.
No matter how powerful you think you are, no matter how much you think you know people in high position, no matter how much money you have, that will not save you.
Corruption has been a major concern. Multi-million-dollar scandals have been unearthed in several public offices. Government officials, politicians, and powerful business people have been implicated. Some have been brought to court. A report by the Auditor General's office shows that a third of the country's budget is lost to corruption and mismanagement every year.
Part of why I'm optimistic is that for the first time, it's not just the job of the Director of Public Prosecutions or the Anti-Corruption Commission. It's a multi-agency, so we're going at this with everything that we have.
And in the spirit of the crackdown, demolitions of buildings on road reserves and riparian land said to have been acquired fraudulently is ongoing.
So this is one of the buildings worth millions of dollars that have been brought down by the government in the last few weeks. It sits right next to an important stream. The next one to go is Oswald Center there. The owners have already started bringing down the parts that are earmarked for demolition.
This is President Uhuru Kenyatta's last term in office, and he's promised more jobs through the manufacturing industry, universal health care, affordable housing and food security. For that to happen, he needs to deal decisively with corruption.
I think he understands that this is the only chance that he has to basically break away from the past, which is basically, I break the law, but I have friends in high places. I make a phone call and it's just going to go away.
Many Kenyans say they're happy with what they're seeing. They're, however, also calling for speedy trials, convictions, and the assets of those found guilty to be confiscated. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Nairobi.
Stay with us. Talking Stocks is next. Welcome back. It's now time for Talking Stocks. 53 stocks traded today, of which 31 advanced, 17 declined, and 5 traded firm. The main JSE index declined by over 1,800 points to close at over 313,500 points. The junior index declined by 22 points to close at 3,135. Over 4.8 million units traded, valued at over 60 million Jamaican dollars on the Jamaican dollar market, while on the US dollar market, 2 units traded, valued at 159 US dollars. Mayberry Jamaican equities with over 1.2 million units trading accounted for 26% of market volume. 1834 Investments with over 1 million units was second, and it accounted for 21% of market share across the floor. And Carreras with a little over 741,000 units trading accounted for 15% of market volume. Salada Foods Limited was the top advancer, up $1.50 to close at $18, followed by Jamaica Broilers Group, up $1.48 to close at $25.35. And Separate Limited up $1.93 to close at $36. The main decliners were Carib Cement, down $6.76 to close at $42.11, followed by JMB Group Limited, down 96 cents to close at $29.04, and Supreme Ventures, down 40 cents to close at $15.16. And that's all the news, but before we go, a recap of our top story. The IMF representative to Jamaica, Dr. Constant Longkeng Ngwana, says the US dollar has been strengthening against its trading partners around the world and not just against the Jamaican currency. That's why he says more Jamaicans should focus on having a competitive rate and not just the fluctuations in the dollar. Thanks for watching, and for more content, visit our website at batvja.com. I'm Garth Williams. Pleasant viewing.